Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on Arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. Hope you're staying cool wherever you are in the world. We've got a bit of a heat wave in Europe at this moment in time. Heat wave is such a benign term for the earth boiling to temperatures it probably shouldn't be boiling to, but I guess that's just, good marketing from Big Sun or whoever it is. Anyway, wherever you are, I hope you're staying cool, it isn't too hot for you, and that you're enjoying the summer as much as possible. There isn't a great deal going on from an Arsenal perspective, but obviously there are some Arsenal adjacent discussions around the World Cup, some of the players involved, a little bit of transfer tittle-tattle, but not too much, and a few changes behind the scenes. So we will talk about those things in just a moment. Later on, though, I will be giving you the winners of the poorly drawn Arsenal competition. Last week, Jacob was on the podcast and we talked about his new book, After Review, which is a nice illustrated keepsake of last season's Premier League title win. So that's coming up a little bit later on. The random number generator will do its thing and pick a couple of winners. I'll let you know who they are towards the end of the show. Right, let's just get on with it. We got to save all the waffle for the actual show itself. And with me this morning to talk about all the bits and bobs that are going on is Tim Stillman. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning.
Were you up late watching Brazil last night?
Yes, I was. I made it until half time,
right,
which actually I've done with the last two Brazil games because the other one was 1:30 in the morning here. And the fact they were 2-0 up at half time against two much weaker teams, I was a bit like, I think I know what the second half's going to be like. It's going to be a bit of a non-event. I was sorry to miss Endrick coming on in both games and then just looking at my timeline, because that has been an international meme that I've really, really enjoyed. But other than that, yeah, made it to half-time for both of those. I think the knockouts in terms of British summertime kickoff times for Brazil are a lot more gentle for us now. But my wife stayed up to watch all of them, obviously.
Well, she's properly committed. You're only half committed because you've got a foot in both camps, you see. So that's the way it is. From what I understand, Gabriel had a good game, but then this part of me goes, like, he pretty much always has a good game.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think apparently he kind of, broke a record. That's probably overstating it. But the first, apparently, I can't remember who it is. I think it was SofaScore kind of posted something like, they've got stats from every World Cup since 1966, and this is the first time that someone's contested 7 duels and won all of them in a World Cup game. Which, I think, that sounds like Gabriel to me.
Yeah.
And they posted it with a picture of him standing over Alisson, I think, and Alisson kind of in a crumpled heap, and Gabriel kind of, fists clench, teeth bared, and if I had teeth like that, I would bare them a lot as well.
Sure.
To be fair,
yeah, you got to show them off. You paid that much for them, you got to show them off.
Yeah, and I looked at it and I thought, Brazil were probably 3-0 up at that point, and he probably just saw the ball back to the goalkeeper, and he celebrated it. I was going to say like he won the Champions League, but that's maybe a sore point.
Too soon. I did enjoy his comments actually this week about it. He was asked in a press conference about it and spoke about the fact that Marquinhos, who's his international central defensive partner, after he missed that penalty, it was only something I became aware of later because, I was just turned around in a crumpled heap in the stadium like everybody else, I think. But took the moment to give him a hug before going to celebrate with his PSG teammates. And I think that was something Gabriel really appreciated, because even at international level, even if you do play with somebody from the same, or play against somebody from the same country, that connection isn't always there, is it? And Marquinhos, I think, as well, as somebody who I'll leave PSG in their own special box of country, but as somebody who's been there in that team for such a long time, has also experienced the dismay, the heartbreak of coming very close in Champions League finals before actually going on to win it.
Yeah, he's a good egg, Marquinhos. I think he's the captain as well of Brazil, and I think I wasn't too surprised by that moment, because generally, you're right, like sometimes international teammates don't get on, they play for rival teams or whatnot. In Brazil, that tends not to be the case. There tends to be a real solidarity between them. And it's one of those national teams where the majority of players go and play in Europe or whatever and actually really enjoy coming back to their national teams and being able to speak their own language and all of that. And most of them are spread out among kind of elite European teams anyway. It's not like you've got a load of like Arsenal and Tottenham players or whatever, but the Brazilian players that live in London tend to get together quite a lot, have a barbecue and all of that. And like, obviously it's not really the same in terms of like, they don't grow up with that kind of Manchester United hate Liverpool and Arsenal hate Chelsea type thing. It's not as kind of ingrained. So I wasn't hugely surprised to see that moment. But I mean, one of the reasons I wouldn't write off Brazil in terms of winning the World Cup is their centre-backs are Marquinhos and Gabriel.
Yeah.
And that has to be the best centre-back partnership at the World Cup, I'd suggest, by some distance. Like, France, Saliba, Upamecano, that's very good as well. Just very happy that there are two Arsenal players that are very much in that conversation. I don't see anyone else that's got anything near that kind of that much quality at centre half, and I think in a World Cup that can take you quite a long way as well.
Yeah, Gabriel Martinelli came on for Lucas Paquetá. I assume Carlo Ancelotti wasn't playing 4D chess and did a bit of a shuffle because Paquetá was playing in midfield and Martinelli does not play there.
Yeah, well, actually, what Brazil have started doing, they're a bit more of a 4-4-2. Obviously, it's an Ancelotti team, so the idea is always let's platform our best player, and they've been playing Vinicius not really off the left. He's been a lot more central, and especially because they don't really have a striker, they kind of play Cunha there. So they're kind of playing Cunha and Vinicius as a kind of very like free-form jazz front two. So Paquetá has actually been playing a bit more like left in a 4-4-2, which I'm not sure that... Well, I say I'm not sure it suits Martinelli. Like, he's not like a midfielder going out to left wing, but I think you could play Martinelli there in a 4-4-2 with his kind of defensive commitment. And actually, Paquetá, I don't think that much of him, to be honest. Like, if I were Martinelli, I wouldn't be counting myself out of winning a place in this team.
Yeah, well, we'll see. And obviously 2 goals from Vinicius Jr. makes the race for the Golden Boot very interesting because he's on 4 now, Haaland on 4 now, Mbappe on 4, Messi on 5. So goals going in all over the place there. England struggled a bit against Ghana, and I watched this, and obviously the Ghana approach was to sit deep and frustrate England in a low block. And if you're an Arsenal fan, you probably looked at that game and had slight PTSD in some ways about what we've experienced over the course of the season. There are obviously difficulties in trying to break down that kind of approach anyway. Are England lacking a bit of craft maybe in midfield? Is the sort of Anderson Rice midfield duo a bit similar? Is there scope for something else? Obviously, we know Noni Madueke, for example, is starting in the team because Bukayo Saka is dealing with this ongoing Achilles injury, and Noni is, he made a decent enough chance, I think, for Declan Rice. He couldn't quite get over the ball. On the other side, I mean, if I'm a Barcelona fan watching Anthony Gordon in this World Cup, I'm thinking, what the fuck? We don't have that much money. What are we spending it on this guy for? One of football's great mysteries so far. Anyway, we'll see how it plays out. But is it a case that maybe England are going to have to think a bit differently about how they approach opposition like this, or is it just a case of like, what the fuck can you do when they sit with all 11 men behind the ball?
Well, I kind of think that this is the only game they'll play like this in the World Cup. I mean, to be fair, Panama might do something similar, but I think Ghana's in that real sweet spot where they're kind of not good enough to take England on and go toe-to-toe in the way that Croatia tried, but they're also a level or two above, let's say, someone like Panama, who probably will play a 5-4-1 and sit behind the ball. So they're kind of in that sweet spot of playing a low block, but actually being quite good as well. And, they've got Semenyo on the break as well as other players. Like, they've got some good players in there. I think this is just quite a unique game in terms of what this World Cup's going to be for England. I think Tuchel probably knows that as well. Like, when it gets to the business end, I mean, it looks like England will play either Mexico or Spain in the next game. They're not going to come up against that. And then, if they get through either of those round of 16, I just don't think they're going to come up against a game like this again, to be honest. And I think Tuchel's reckoned with that a little bit. And he's going very Premier League-y in terms of, he's going quite Arsenal-y as well. Yeah. Actually, because he's got those two brilliant set piece takers, although really leaning into Declan Rice on that.
Are you a bit surprised at that? Because listen, I sort of made a joke yesterday about how England have got to get Declan Rice to do basically everything. But it did strike me as a bit strange that Rice's in-swingers for Arsenal have been so effective, but so too have the in-swingers from the other side. And Noni Madueke has a few assists. I don't think he's as good a corner taker as Bukayo Saka, but I do think he delivers a good ball, and we've scored some goals. I remember Martinelli scoring a couple. It could have been in a cup game.
Portsmouth.
And then there was a Zubimendi goal, I think, that cracker from the edge of the box. Forest, maybe.
A couple against Leeds. Yeah,
So Madueke's got that in his locker, and then Saka came on, and they didn't get Saka to take corners. It was like, come on, Declan, run all the way over to the other side now and take another corner. So the outswinger, in-swinger thing, maybe it's a bit of variety, but I'm a little bit surprised that if you are looking at the best set-piece team in the Premier League, which I think is evidently Arsenal, I'm not saying copy everything that we do, but to not use one of the main weapons, which is the in-swinger from the other side, seems a little strange.
I do find it strange, yeah, particularly because England, even in the Ghana game, it was the in-swingers from Rice that went all the way to the back post. Those are the ones that seem to cause the most kind of issues, and quite a lot of players just can't do that. They just can't get the ball to the back post with that kind of whip and that kind of drop on it. So I am surprised they didn't utilize. I don't think Madueke does that, but he does quite a good kind of near post corner. So I have been surprised by that, and it'll be interesting because I suspect Declan Rice won't play against Panama because of this kind of calf niggle he's got. I'd be very surprised if he played in that game. I'd be very surprised if England didn't think they could do something against Panama. And, there are 5 knockout games now, right? So I think they'd be looking after their own interests by keeping Rice out of this game. So it'd be really interesting to see what they do when Rice doesn't play. Are they going to get another right footer to go for an outswinger, or are they going to lean a bit more into a Madueke delivery? I have found that quite strange, yes. But overall with the Ghana game as well, I do think that there was a little bit of a subconscious context where a draw was okay for England. And I don't think that's what Tuchel would have said or would have wanted, and his substitutions didn't suggest that. I still think in the back of a player's mind, if you know 0-0's okay, you probably don't get that extra 1-2% if this had been a round of 32, round of 16, we have to score type thing. I think that counts for something as well. And very, very few teams who win tournaments win every single game. They all tend to have a bit of a lag in a group game somewhere. And it's sometimes it's when they know they can afford it. And then sometimes you get that situation. Spain had it in 2010. Argentina had it last time. You lose the first game, and then every game after that basically becomes a knockout game. So sometimes that can serve you as well, because you go straight into knockout mode. But I think with this expanded format, it's even less like that. And to be honest, I tried to watch a bit of one of the games last night, and I was watching Canada-Switzerland, and particularly the first match day 3 games, it's kind of we just don't know at the moment. Scotland have got this weird thing where they're probably out, but they won't know until Saturday night, local time. So they've just kind of got to sit there and train for 2 days, knowing that they're probably not going to play again. And it's kind of weird. I think it does remove a lot of the jeopardy, and it has made the group stage sportingly a bit of a non-event.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And obviously for fans as well who are out there who don't know if they should go home or, fuck it, I'll stay and have a few beers, see what happens. It doesn't help as well when Harry Kane misses a sitter, obviously, puts it over the bar from about 7 yards. He annoyed me the other night, actually, because there was a cross came in, Saka went for the header, and he didn't make good contact with it. It was just a bit too high for him. But Harry Kane was behind him, sort of gesturing as if like, you took away a brilliant chance from me. And it was like, you weren't even anywhere near it. What are you doing? But of course, I'm sort of predisposed not to like Harry Kane because of his connections. You mentioned Rice and the calf niggle that he has. How worried are you about that? Because ahead of the game against Ghana, he was talking about neural pain and, his lower back, his hamstring, which, sounds very much like a guy who, you see the phrase, he's been run into the ground quite a lot when talking about players. And sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. In Declan Rice's case, it feels very accurate that the burden on him over the last little while has been quite significant. So how worried are you that there is seemingly a new issue for him to deal with?
Quite worried, to be honest, not least because I think there's a good chance they must be linked. The calf and the hamstring type thing or the lower back. And it's one thing to try and nurse one of those things. I think it's probably not possible to nurse both. And I think it's also interesting in light of what he said after the first game where he came off with about 20 minutes to go. And he kind of said, obviously in the last 20 minutes, it's all a bit more of a strain. And that's when it happens, right? Like 2 minutes to go. He's the lone six now because England have thrown on all of their 10s. So he's covering back into space, right back down next to the corner flag, big sprint. And so it does look a little bit ominous to me. At first, I thought he'd been caught. I thought, because the way he hobbled, it kind of looked like, maybe he just got a little kind of stud on the Achilles or something when he was playing the ball. But, I mean, if it is his calf, that kind of means he pulled up. I know the reporting, like Sammy Mockbell's kind of saying it looks like not serious, that it probably just needs rest as well. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, he did miss some games with that issue. Like if I trace it back, he said since Christmas, I think he missed the Aston Villa game just after Christmas last season. So I imagine I'm tracing it back to there. Really, and I do often see him like cradling his back, kind of the last 10 minutes or so. And actually, I feel like this back thing's gone on for a little while for him, that maybe it goes back to even before that. Because I know maybe 2 seasons ago, there were games he was substituted kind of complaining about his back. So it does feel quite long term. And I think it's understandable that we're worried about that because it feels like we've been here before. It feels like with players like Saka and Havertz, it feels like the kind of the siren's been sounding until they do just break. And both of those players have broken in the last kind of 18 months. And it kind of feels like if we're not careful, that could be the case for Declan Rice as well. Saliba as well is saying that he's been playing with a back issue. Basically, I think Arsenal have done a lot of things in the transfer market as well that they were just so focused on getting over the line and getting this title won, which I completely understand. But they maybe did some quite short-term things, maybe with players' fitness, maybe with some transfer decisions they made that were so geared on winning this title that actually now I feel like making that next leap onto the next lily pad, as it were, retaining and all of that. I think we've got quite a bit of work to do. I don't just assume we're going to turn up and win it again next year. And particularly, if we're missing our best players again, which to be fair, we were last season as well. But if we add to that, if we add to the fact that we keep missing Odegaard, Saka and Havertz, and we add Rice to that, like the guy just won player of the season, and there's a reason for that. And I feel like, if we keep extending that pool of players who have questionable fitness, like really, really big players for us, then it does feel like next season could be a real struggle for us.
It is a situation, I think, with Rice in particular, maybe Saka to a lesser extent. Maybe this is a conversation you could have had about Saka a year ago before that big hamstring injury that the demands on him at club level and international level were such that, it feels negligent almost not to take that into account and not to give him a rest, right? So if you're stepping back and looking at this, and maybe Declan Rice plays another 3, 4, 5 games in this World Cup, who knows? Mm-hmm. If you're stepping back objectively and you're looking at it, you're saying this is a man who has played a lot, whose playing style is such that he really is committed in terms of the ground he covers and the energy he commits to every single performance. This is a man who absolutely needs a rest. And it would be wrong of Mikel Arteta or Thomas Tuchel or anybody else to sort of say, right, you've had 3 weeks rest, we go again. Mm. At the same time, though, he's Declan Rice. And, it's like there are certain players who are just so good that they're going to play all the time. Like we have it at the back with William Saliba and Gabriel. There was a little bit of management of William Saliba at times last season, but Gabriel had a hamstring injury. You remember in the early part of the season that it, I think it happened at the Emirates, didn't it, when Brazil were playing there, and he missed a good few weeks. And you're thinking, okay, but when he comes back, you can do a bit of Nkapie, do a bit of Mosquera, maybe do a bit of Calafiori, and the best players play. So that is the conundrum that Arteta faces, that Thomas Tuchel faces, that Declan Rice faces, that for all the talk of like, we have to give him a rest, and that makes every bit of common sense, it's not the way football works.
No.
So what do you do? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of those guys who either aren't at the World Cup or else are not going to play that much at the World Cup. So even someone like Zubimendi, right? Spain are probably going to go deep. They might even win it. I don't know how many minutes he's going to play, though. And I'm quite relieved about that. Mm-hmm. Mikel Merino, he missed a lot of last season. It wasn't a muscle injury. I think the World Cup will be useful for him in terms of like just knocking some of the rough edges off. And then I'm looking at guys like Miles Lewis-Skelly, Nkapie. I think did he get injured playing for Ecuador?
Well, he went into it, didn't he, with a bit of a hamstring strain because he just about got through the Champions League final.
Yeah. But I don't think Ecuador will go that far. Someone like Mosquera as well. I really think Lewis-Skelly's got a really big chance because he'll play most of pre-season and I'm sure he'll play most of it in midfield. And we've seen this before where a player impresses in pre-season in a tournament summer and they stay in the team. It happened with Wilshere, kind of happened that way with Fabregas as well. These young players, they get a whole pre-season under their belt and you start playing them, even like something like Ben White starting a season at right back, which was at the time a temporary solution because Tomiyasu was injured, and then it was like, that works. We'll keep doing that. So some of these guys have like a bit of an opportunity in the longer term, but someone like Mosquera, for example, during pre-season, I would be preparing for him to start all of our first 4 or 5 games, maybe in various positions, maybe one at right back, one at right centre back, one at left centre back. Calafiori, who, by the way, looks like he's having a lovely old time on holiday in Rio.
He was in Argentina first, I think, and then he's gone to Brazil.
Yeah. Lots of videos of him singing samba, and his Portuguese is decent, actually. So like someone like Calafiori as well, like not having a summer tournament, that will be not good for him, but good for us, I think, because he's a player. I'd have been very concerned if he was going to a summer tournament and maybe like just the summer off is really what he needs to get over his kind of various injuries. So I'm looking at players like this. Even someone like Martinelli is not going to play a whole load of minutes at the World Cup. Like I'm looking at these guys and I'm thinking you might have to carry a bit of a burden until there's a real water break in the season this year where there's that 3-week international break in September.
You mean an ad break, I think is.
Hydration break for 3 weeks, which FIFA do not, according to Gianni Infantino, profit from, but it is sponsored by Powerade. So there you go.
Funny that.
Yeah. So there's that feels like a real kind of watermark in the season. And I don't know, it will depend on where particular national teams are, but I'd like to think that maybe we could wriggle one or two of our players out of that, maybe, and just kind of say, look, or I don't know how many games there are going to be across that 3-week period, but Thomas, maybe only play Saka and Rice for one or two of them, whichever the slightly more difficult ones are, and other countries.
Is it Nations League or is it European Championship qualifiers? Or I don't know either.
I don't know. I'm not interested enough to know.
That's it. It just feels like there's so much football and so much international football. It's hard to see the wood for the trees to an extent. I did see, Andrew Allen did a story on Arseblog News about obviously a new doctor is about to arrive, or has probably arrived and is settling in now. And there's a guy joining from Real Betis who is a rehab specialist. So clearly some changes are being made there behind the scenes, in the medical department, physio department, player welfare department. I don't know if you can call it player welfare, but clearly it's something the club are looking at and looking at every angle for, and they're obviously aware of the demands of this summer and this summer's tournament on their players and some of their best players, obviously. But maybe doing things behind the scenes could be a bit of a help as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the speed with which the club doctor left, and I know you and James made this point a lot on the Arsecast Extra, but just to emphasise as well, I don't think any of us should be under the illusion, the doctor, he was at fault for it all. No. Like we had some kind of crazy Dr. Nick type character, just like chopping legs off and stuff like that.
We're signing Mr. McGregor with a leg for an arm and an arm for a leg.
Or we had some kind of scene from Misery going on back there or anything so I'm not under the illusion, we've changed the club doctor, everything's solved. But the speed with which that happened at the end of the season, suggests that was a live conversation during the season and that they didn't waste any time with that. It doesn't look like, we'll have a big internal review for a couple of weeks. And it feels like they were talking about that during the season. And, they let the doc get his medal. Perhaps he was at the parade. I don't know. And then the day after that, there's your P45, son. Thanks for your service. So it's clearly a very, very kind of live issue. And listen, I think we've had Mikel Arteta as our manager long enough to understand that he's quite a ruthless person like that, and he will leave no stone unturned. But yeah, clearly something had to change there, whether it's the doctor, whether it's the way they train. We had players pull out in the warm-up last year, whether it's the way they warm up. None of us can know that. And I think a lot of it's a relatively inexact science anyway. And the likelihood is it's quite multifactorial anyway. That's just life. Most problems do not just have one cause. But clearly, I never doubted for a second that there would be a big kind of internal kind of bit of navel gazing about it and what can we do. But I think whether, changing the club doctor changes anything, or I don't know. But I think the swiftness with which that decision was taken tells me they're taking it very, very seriously. That doesn't mean they'll solve it. But even if they could just alleviate it a bit, I think with the modern game and the way it is, I think what Arsenal have done and where they might be a bit ahead of the curve is they're just you got to have 25 good players. You can't have even Guardiola was very,
he wanted a smaller squad, didn't he?
Yeah. But obviously where everyone's amazing. So it's that, Man City would generally have 19 players that were all first 11 quality, but maybe you've got to knock that up to 25, and maybe you've got to, accept that you're going to have, we might go into the season with Eze, Rodgers and Odegaard, for that kind of number 10 position. And that sounds like a lot, until you think, well, probably at least one of them is going to be injured at all times. So there's probably never going to be a scenario where all three of them are fit. So,
I think that is something Arteta spoke about, actually, when he was asked about the demands of the modern game. And his point was there's never going to be less football. There will not be fewer games because there's too much money in the game now. So the only answer to that, and I think what he said was, we need to have bigger squads. Now, I don't know if he wants a 30-man squad, but I think your point about getting a 25-man squad where the levels are, you lift the ceiling as much as you can, but you also lift the floor as much as you can, for want of a better expression. Maybe that's how you deal with it. There's an interesting, another little snippet before I have a question here for you. We've added a guy to the technical team. His name is Javier Alonso, not Xavi Alonso, but Javier Alonso, who comes from Granada. He was their sporting director. So clearly Andrea Berta is doing bits behind the scenes as well. And we'll see what that looks like in terms of recruitment. But I did have a question that's sort of related to injuries. We got a few questions from our Discord. And Gunnosaurus Flex says, with the news about our players playing through significant pain in the last few months of the season, should we be concerned that the level of desire to push through and go again will be gone because we've won the league? Is that a concern for you, or do you sort of think players, once they get out there and once the business starts, they're also driven and ambitious and they care so much that you can't just sort of say, I won it last year, who gives a fuck now?
I think it's a justifiable concern. We haven't retained a league title for like 93 years. So I think it's justifiable. And lots of players do talk about that, like that one of the most difficult, like it's difficult to do it the first time, but it's very, very difficult to kind of get yourself up for it and go for it again. And with some of the physical issues that we might have, on the kind of, I guess, positive side of that, first of all, I think if there's one manager who will do everything in his power to not let that happen, it will be Mikel Arteta. And I've never, like, whatever qualms I've had about performances, about attributes maybe we're missing, I've never quite, I can't remember the last time I saw an Arsenal game and didn't think that every player was giving 100% every single time. I really can't remember that happening. And so, like, I have, and also, I don't see, and this is largely because a lot of the bigger clubs around us have changed managers. Man City have changed manager, Chelsea have changed manager, Liverpool are changing manager. So they're all a little bit unknown. I would be surprised if a 90-point team emerges next season. So I do think we should be looking at this and going, we're going in as favourites and we have our flaws and we have things to address. I think there were things I saw at the end of last season that do need to be fixed, like the technical level that needs fixing. We need to find a way to score more goals. We're a bit of an outlier as a league champion in terms of pass completion, in terms of goals scored, like those things. Where we are in those metrics, league champions tend to trend much higher. And so I kind of question whether we could do last season again. Maybe we could, because maybe that's just the way the Premier League is now. But I don't think we can bank on that. So I think there's enough improvement. I do also think that maybe losing the Champions League final potentially ameliorates a bit of that, because it gives us a sense of unfinished business. I think if we'd won both trophies, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a good thing we didn't. Like, sign me up for both of them, winning both of them. But that's how our season ended. Our season ended on a painful final defeat. And in terms of hunger, that could I say be useful. I wouldn't go that far, but it could stop that sense of like, okay, we've kind of done it now, because there's still a competition where we've literally never done it to go for. And I do think this group of players should be looking at themselves and saying, we're all somewhere between 25 and 27 years old. Guardiola's gone. Klopp's gone. This is our window. Like, we could really win the next 2 or 3 or win like 4 of the next 5 or whatever until we really have to refresh this group, which is going to be a massive challenge.
Yeah.
And one I suspect another manager might take on, actually.
No, I agree with that as well, yeah.
Because I think we're looking 3-4 years in the future, right? I think Arteta will probably sign another contract, hope he does, and it will probably be a 3 or 4 year deal or something. And then at that point, a lot of our big players who are going to be so difficult to replace, that might get left to someone else. And I wouldn't blame Arteta for doing that. Yeah. And he'll have been at the club a long time by then as well.
You just need to find the next Declan Rice, the next Bukayo Saka, the next William Saliba, the next Gabriel, the next David Raya, the blah, blah. Good luck to that, man.
Because that's where Liverpool are now, right? It's like, where's the next Mohamed Salah? Where's the next Van Dijk? Where's the next Mane? Thankfully, we don't have to think about that for a few years. What we should be thinking about is the next 3 or 4 years, they could and should be ours, certainly domestically, I think. So I hope that kind of keeps the players hungry a little bit. But again, I wouldn't be surprised, again, like almost talking like the England-Ghana game again, just subconsciously it might. And we all remember what Per Mertesacker said after winning the World Cup in 2014. He was very honest and said, like, first couple of months of the next season were difficult because, like, I'd achieved the biggest thing I was ever going to achieve in my career. And he possibly never came back from that to the level that he was before that.
Apart from the 2017 FA Cup final.
Yeah, exactly. So, so I think that's a justifiable concern. But at the same time, I think, you know, there are potentially things in place to amend for that a little bit.
There's a question here from Andrew who says, and this is seeing as we're talking about Mikel Arteta, he says, every season so far, Mikel Arteta has learned something about the team and addressed it through transfers. My question is about Mikel himself. What do you think he learned last season about his coaching or management of the team and how he will address it next season? I actually think that is possibly Arteta's biggest strength, is identifying, if not an area of weakness, an area for improvement. And that could be of the team, and it can also be of himself. You know, there were questions early on, like, is he any good at substitutes? And then I think last season we had more goals from substitutes than any other team. So it is something
he
that over the course. Sometimes he does overfix. Yeah, like, you know, I agree with that. But do you think there's something in a season where he achieved something that was obviously fantastic and amazing and we all loved so much, is there still room for self-recrimination, if that's the right way to put it, or you know, a brutal assessment of your own performance that you think, well, how do I, let's say, deal with the EFL Cup in a way that might not be, in the grand scheme of things, something that affects us later in the season, if that makes sense. Like, there's certainly that little blippy time where we lost to Manchester City. I saw conversations of people go, well, you see, if we didn't take the EFL Cup seriously, we'd have more energy for games like this, and that's our fault for trying to win every game. But at the same time, you want to have this culture of, well, every game matters and every performance matters. And when you pull on the shirt, you can't be half-arsed. You know, we've seen that happen before. Nobody likes it, whether it's the EFL Cup or anything else. When you see players and you go like, nah, they don't really give a fuck about this game. You know, even if you understand it, you don't like it as a fan. So I think it is an interesting question about Mikel himself. Yeah,
I have this conversation with Elliot a lot because he's very like, you know, light the EFL Cup on fire and throw it in the bin, which I completely understand. I don't think that's how it is. I don't think it's that we prioritise it and focus on it. It all comes down to the draw. And actually what's happened in the EFL Cup the last couple of seasons, we've had a pretty smooth run to the semi-final. You know, we've had some quite kind draws. Like, you know, we had Port Vale away in the third round last year. Like, we'd have to do something pretty catastrophic to lose that game, I think. And there have been seasons when the draw is harder, we go out earlier. We had a couple of years in a row in the FA Cup. We went out the FA Cup in the third round the year before last against Man United. We were out in the third round the year before that against Liverpool. We went out in the fourth round the year before that against Man City. So I don't think the evidence stacks up that Arteta really prioritises the cups. I think it just depends on the draw. And the truth is, and like the FA Cup last year, the draw just opened up for us. We got Portsmouth, Mansfield. We had a pretty gentle run to the quarterfinal. Even the quarterfinal, we got a championship team. And eventually we went out there and we played our second team, really. So I guess what it comes down to with the EFL Cup is once you get into the semi-final, what kind of team do you play? And I guess really I think the only space there is just throw the semi-finals as well. And, we've got a big enough squad to do that and maybe not take that seriously, maybe.
But how do you not take a semi-final seriously when you get to that
Chelsea
point?
As well,
yeah, exactly.
Like, who would have been happy about losing to Chelsea? And we still did make some decisions in those games. It wasn't quite full throttle. So I think it just depends on the draw. If we get Man City away in the third round of the Carabao Cup next year, or whatever the hell it's called now, we'd probably go out. We might well go out. I just think the cup opened up for the EFL Cup has opened up for us in the last couple of years, and I don't think that will necessarily hold again. In terms of what else Arteta could analyse, I mean, I think there's a lot. What's fascinating for me about next season, I think we lost some points this season because of anxiety. Like I look at that Bournemouth game, maybe the Man United home game, Wolves away. I think we lost some points because we were just a bit scared. And that shouldn't happen next season. Now the monkey's off the back.
Does that also connect to the point that you made earlier on about goal scoring and about scoring more goals? That anxiety is obvious when you've got a 1-goal lead or you're drawing a game, and you're thinking, okay, well, we've got to score again to get 3 points, or we don't want to lose or don't want to concede again because we're going to drop 2 points because the margins are small. Is that, do you think, part of the way that he might approach that aspect of the little weakness that we had? Because we did have, if you go back over last season, we conceded quite a lot of late goals. And I think 1 or 2, that's fine. That can happen over the course of a season. If it's 7 or 8, which I think it was, I'd have to go back and look properly, but I remember going through them in one of the blogs a couple of months ago. When it's that number, that's an issue. That's a sort of a crack in the facade a little bit.
Definitely. The success rate of trying to hold 1-0 was variable last season. When we did it, we all kind of came away saying, well, we're really good at that because we've got really good... I kind of think we are generally. I think our success rate at doing that would probably be higher than anyone else in the league. But it was still probably about 50%. We did get pegged back in quite a few games. So I definitely think there's that part to it. I wonder, in terms of self-reflection, I wonder if he'll look at how he managed that Bournemouth game. And this might be post hoc kind of stuff, but they're kind of really trying to G the crowd up and all of that. This could be just totally outcome based, and that might not have had an impact at all, but maybe he'll look at that and say, yeah, actually maybe I cranked the pressure up at a time when I maybe could have taken it down a little bit. And actually I think he did kind of change when we lost that Man City game and it became the 5-game playoff. I think he did tone it down a little bit. And he wasn't defeatist about it. He was still using phrases like this is a beautiful opportunity and all of that. But I think he did less of the kind of riling up type of stuff.
Fire.
And it was a little bit,
fire.
Yeah. And it was a little bit more even keeled. Maybe he'll look at something like that. But when it comes to our attack, honestly, I think the best thing that can happen is that Saka, Havertz and Odegaard are fitter. I think it's very unlikely we're going to be able to buy any players better than that in the transfer window. I think if they are fitter, we will look better in attack. I kind of think it's that simple.
I don't disagree with that. I do think that adding something to the forward line is quite important, whether it's different qualities, different skill sets, a bit of youthful exuberance, whatever it might be. Yep. We had a couple of questions then, because obviously our leading scorer last season was Viktor Gyokeres, a player around whom there was always a lot of debate, a lot of discussion. So we had a couple of questions on this. Medfly says, with the recent revelation from Hand of Arsenal that Viktor Gyokeres would possibly be part of a deal for Julian Alvarez, how damaging would it be for his morale if it didn't happen? I wouldn't feel great if I was a striker. It came out they were looking to move me on after one season. And John Larkin says, Gyokeres isn't everyone's cup of tea, but the man moved heaven and heart to come play for us last summer. Am I the only one feeling a bit uncomfortable with the report that we're considering getting rid of him in a deal for a player, Julian Alvarez, who we aren't even the preferred club to join? Like, I think, you know, if you offered any Arsenal fan, or maybe most Arsenal fans anyway, the chance to sign Julian Alvarez this summer, they'd probably say yes, because he is a really, really good player and an impressive player, and who does have experience in England. I feel personally like that situation is messy. I'm not sure what Andrea Berta's relationship is like with Atletico Madrid, because he did seem to get pushed out a little bit before he ended up joining Arsenal. There were reports of a falling out with Diego Simeone, which I wouldn't imagine is too difficult to do for anybody, not least someone who's working in close quarters with him for like 10 years. I'd say there comes a point where it's like, I need to get away from you. But the Alvarez situation feels a little bit messy, and like, you hear these reports, or you read these reports about high-profile swap deals. They fucking never happen. They just never happen. And it's sort of like, well, they're prepared to use X player as a make-weight in this deal. But the reality is that you just never see, or very, very rarely see, a big-name player being used as a swap for another big-name player.
Yeah, so I mean, on one hand, if this were to happen, it's a bit Ramsdale, isn't it? It's a bit Ramsdale for Raya, potentially. So, you know, we have done that. We have kind of gone there. My concern about it is less over that, because I kind of think a player would get over it. It actually it happened in the women's team. Like, when Arsenal first tried to sign Alessia Russo, they kind of they potentially like floated a swap deal with Stina Blackstenius, and I think that was a bit awkward. But it's like 3.5 years later, and she's still here, and she's just signed a new contract. Like, time's passed, everyone's got over it, type thing. I think my concern with it, I don't actually know how good Julian Alvarez is, if I'm completely honest. Now, I don't watch very much Spanish football, but he doesn't he strikes me as a really good player. I'd be very happy to add him, but he doesn't strike me as that, oh my God, like, we must, like, this player will completely transform us type thing. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But also, like, I think as much as I've been critical of Gyokeres, and as much as I still have my doubts, he does something really useful for us in terms of the type of player he is. I kind of want that option in the squad, particularly when our other striker is Havertz. I think he very much diverges in profile from that, and I think that's useful. What I would really like to happen is for Havertz to stay fit and Gyokeres to kind of become almost what we always wanted Giroud to be, which was really, really good option to have, really good guy to bring on, really good guy to play in certain games, but actually I just don't want him playing every single game all the time. And what's kind of really curious about Gyokeres is he has scaled up exactly what he did in Portugal, which is he scores against all the teams in the bottom half of the table. And that's actually really useful for a team like Arsenal, who do not have that kind of Erling Haaland, Mo Salah type, this guy will definitely score home and away against like Crystal Palace and West Ham and all of that. And I do think Gyokeres is a really useful player to have in that respect. And I just wonder if Alvarez and Havertz is a little bit more of the same. And robs us a little bit of that diversity. And is Alvarez, how many goals did Gyokeres score last season?
21.
21.
And,
okay.
and Alvarez scored 20.
Yeah, okay.
He got 8 goals in La Liga in 29 appearances. He got 10 goals in the Champions League in 15 appearances. So
that's quite interesting, but I also kind of think the Premier League, like, we want someone who's going to score in the Premier League against teams that are quite good and quite good at doing low blocks. So if we substituted Alvarez for Gyokeres, I wonder if we'd be giving up some goals. And I'm not sure we're a team that can afford to give up some goals, you know. I do think that in lieu of a real, like, safe bet as a goal scorer, having a guy who beats up on the lower end, on the kind of bottom half of the table is actually really useful to us. So I'm a little bit, I'm just not sure about giving that up and what we get in return. Whereas I think a player we get in return might just have a lot of the qualities we kind of already have, which is fine if he's, like, just notably better than everyone we have, which he might be. Like I say, I don't watch enough Spanish football, but I'm just a little bit dubious about where that spectrum meets in the middle. Is he good enough that we give up a player with those qualities? Does he replace those goals? Does he raise our ceiling enough? The answer to all of those might be yes, but I'm just a little bit... If you were telling me, for the sake of being a bit crude, Real Madrid are going to take Gyokeres and we'll get Vinicius Jr. in return, yes, I'm taking that. I'm taking that all day long. Like, if you want 50 million plus Gyokeres for Vinny Jr., I'm doing that because he is going to, like, just raise the level of what we're capable of in attack. And I'm just not convinced that Alvarez is definitely that player.
Yeah, I think if it was an uncomplicated situation, it might be one that you could pursue more vigorously. But I think obviously the fact that he clearly wants to go to Barcelona, and Barcelona clearly want him, and Atletico Madrid are having none of Barcelona's bullshit, which is fucking great to see, by the way. Listen, I would take him, but I also think we need 3 strikers. I think we need... You know, Havertz, there's a good interview with Kai Havertz in the Guardian with Nick Ames. And it's just sort of a throwaway line where he's talking about the injuries. And he sort of says the last 18 months have been bad and challenging because obviously he had the hamstring surgery. Then he had that knee injury at the start of last season, which kept him out for half the season. When he came back, I think we saw what the plan was. You know, ultimately, at the end of the season, we saw what the plan was when everyone was fit. Mikel Arteta started Kai Havertz. He started Kai Havertz in a Champions League final.
Champions League final and Man City away.
Yeah.
What did he do?
Exactly. Started him there, which isn't to diminish Gyokeres in any way, because I think the role, that when they sat down and thought about, right, who are we going to bring in, what way are they going to complement each other, if Gyokeres is, for want of a better expression, a little bit of a flat track bully and he's going to score against all the teams in the bottom half of the league, that's fucking brilliant. That is a very, very good thing to have, and we can use him there, and then we can keep Kai a bit on the, it didn't work out like that. But I do think we need a third striker. I think Jesus will go. Myself and James talked about it the other day, so I don't really want to get into that again, but maybe just somebody with a slightly different profile to both of those players is something we're going to look at in the transfer market. And I think Alvarez is that, but I also think it's really complicated, also really, really expensive deal to do with Atletico Madrid. There's a question here from Kenyon Fjordkarst, who says, how much stock should we put into the rumours of Odegaard leaving, or at least the club being willing to let him go? And that was something that was sort of doing the rounds. I'm like an Odegaard advocate. I think his issues are fitness, and that's a discussion I think you can have. And I think that's a very reasonable discussion to have about Martin Odegaard after the last 18 months or so. Like Havertz, he had a big injury and hasn't quite looked the same since. But in terms of the quality of the player, I find it really strange that people are dismissing the quality of Odegaard. I know we're not seeing it as much, but surely the last 3 or 4 years before he had those injuries is enough evidence of what he can actually do with a football.
Yeah, what's interesting to me here is, has he got 2 years left on his deal at the moment?
So.
And we're not hearing about contract talks, which suggests there's a little bit of doubt.
Yeah, 2028.
Yeah, and unless that's just happening very, very secretly and we don't know about it. It suggests that there's at least a question mark there. I wouldn't give him up in a million years at the moment, and the reason for that is, again, like I actually picked this up in my column a little bit this week. We don't have another player like that. That's the thing. I think if we sell Odegaard, we sell one of our only attacking midfielders who really looks after the ball at an elite level. And there are a lot of games where that clearly means a lot to us. Like Odegaard starts a lot of games, even if he's perhaps at the moment not quite what he was a couple of years ago, where it's like come hell or high water, he's playing every minute of every game. But there are games where we prioritise control of the ball. And he has to play those games because Eze can't really do that. If we sign Morgan Rogers, he can't really do that. At a minimum, we have to have that option. So I think if we sell Odegaard, we just have to go out and buy another player like Odegaard, which I kind of regard as a bit pointless. I know we're going to have to probably make some sales that might be a bit questionable. Generally, if you're going to make money from a sale, it has to be a bit questionable. If you're selling someone you don't want, you're not going to bring in a lot of money for them.
The Ethan Waneri edict, perhaps you might call it.
Exactly. So I wouldn't give this player up because I think we'd just have to go out and buy another one. For me, the one I'd potentially look at as the debate and the question mark, if we're bringing Morgan Rogers in, I think you start to ask if what's Eze's role? I think that's more where I would. I'm not particularly inclined to get rid of him either.
Sure.
I'd rather maybe just sell one of the left wingers, but I think that would be a bigger question if we bring Morgan Rogers in, because Rogers and Eze are quite similar players. So again, it kind of comes down to profiles. I know I'm probably coming off on this as don't sell anyone, like hold on to all of them for dear life, but I kind of think like there's a profile question there around Gyokeres and Odegaard for completely different reasons.
Sure.
That I just kind of think we need a player like that at a very high level in our squad.
No, I completely agree. We need creativity, we need craft, and he is a guy who can do that in ways that are different from anybody else that we have in the squad. And yeah, it's either keep him and get him back to full fitness, or if you are going to make the decision or sell him, then you have to find another player with that kind of ability in the final third. I know we haven't seen as much of it as we would like, but I really do think he's a player he's a player you really, really have to consider very carefully. You know, you can't just sell him and not replace him, or you can't just sell him and replace him with Morgan Rogers. I just don't think for a team like Arsenal, we've talked about goal scoring, you need somebody to make those chances. And somebody who's got that vision. Just finally, this is quite an interesting one, or funny one anyway. Sanket, who's on the Discord, says Ramsey or Wilshere now as managers. I do think that's quite interesting, isn't it? Ramsey and Jack Wilshere, obviously manager of Luton Town, and Aaron Ramsey this week appointed head coach of Oxford United. Another one of Arsen's pupils now becoming the teacher.
Yeah, really interesting. And they both seem really, really invested in the idea as well. I know Ramsey did a lot of work before the end of his career. I think what's also interesting is both of them had injury issues, right? And they probably had a lot of time to think about this. Unfortunately, as young men, they got big injuries, and they probably both had an idea that they weren't going to be playing till they were in their late 30s. So,
yeah.
It's quite interesting that they've both really thrown their lot in, and it's not the first like real managerial role for either of them either. Like Ramsey had that little caretaker spell at Cardiff, which must have been very difficult for him because they went down, and that's his boyhood club. That's a traumatic thing to go through. You look at like Alan Shearer had that with Newcastle, never went back to management. That's
true, yeah.
Whereas Ramsey's obviously not been put off by that experience. Wilshere, we know because he was at Arsenal, we know he interviewed for other positions, that he's very ambitious about, his managerial career and the idea of being a manager. So it is really interesting that both of them have gone into it. Like I say, I suspect they've both just had to reckon with a very sadly, a very early point in their career that they had to think about post-career. And they've both decided, at least for now, they've both decided that management's really for them. They've both shown a willingness to start relatively low down, which again, top-class British footballers don't always do. Some of them don't think they have to do that and end up on fucking Piers Morgan's podcast, whinging about it, which is not where anyone wants to be, really. They've both...
Well, some people want to be, but, they're people of a dubious character, I think we should say.
They've both got, Luton, I'll take that. Oxford, I'll take that. Like, they're both... very prepared to do that, which I think is very, very admirable, because both of them are big name players and they could easily sit around whinging about how they should have this job and that job. I think there are some big former Arsenal players we all love who probably in that kind of in that bracket as well, shall we say, who are maybe looking at Mikel Arteta and saying, "Oh, that should have been me," really. So like, good luck to both of them. I really, really hope both of them do really well. I'm really struck by Wilshere as well, like how much he seems to have, at least from a distance, matured, because as a player, I mean, obviously he came into the team very young, but, as a player, perhaps he, and I don't say this pejoratively, I think it's completely natural for a guy who comes into a team like Arsenal at the age of 19. Perhaps he lacked that maturity sometimes. I do think perhaps he put his body through too much, didn't listen to his body. I think sometimes he tried to be a bit too, should we say, British, like, I'm going to crash into all the challenges as well. And like, no, you're not that kind of player, Jack. But actually, as a manager, like both when he was at Arsenal in the youth teams, and I've listened to a few of his interviews at Luton, like, he's like, because he's still only like, is he 34?
Yeah, he's young.
Like he's
34.
Incredibly young, to be a manager, and he sounds like he's really, really matured. I don't think that's ever been an issue for Aaron Ramsey particularly. So, like, really fair play to both of them. I really hope both of them go on to have really good careers. Not least because, particularly in Jack's case, I don't think their careers delivered what they should have delivered due to injuries. Yeah. So I really hope they can make up for some of that as managers.
Yeah, I think with Wilshere, people think about the FA Cup celebrations and getting on the mic, and he's had a few beers, and maybe he's Jack the Lad kind of a guy. But I listen, I don't seek out talk sport at all, ever. But I have seen him on the radio quite a few times, and he's a smart guy. And he thinks about football in an interesting way. And, obviously Aaron Ramsey, a little less of a character, perhaps a little more vanilla, even though vanilla's great, by the way. So, let's see how they go. And let's never forget that Aaron Ramsey refused to shake Piers Morgan's hand.
Yes, which is a great sign of character. I'd also say as well, if you're Ramsey, like, it's not a massive jump to the Wales job, I don't think. Craig Bellamy's had it. That Gary Speed, obviously very tragic what happened there, but Gary Speed had it with not much managerial experience. Chris Coleman had it. Like, I kind of think if he does well at Oxford, he could get the Wales job, and I'm sure he's got that in his mind as well. Yeah.
Final question, just quickly, because I know this is something you've talked about a bit on the Arsenal Women Arsecast, but it's obviously been quite a busy summer for Arsenal Women in terms of departures, as a lot of names have gone. That obviously suggests that there's going to be some business coming in. Are you expecting things to start moving quickly?
Yes. So what happens in the women's transfer window is that there's a lot more free transfers, transfer fees, not a big thing yet. Contracts run down. There are at least 4 players, big players, who are coming in on Bosman deals. Arsenal are very straight-laced and do not announce those until the contracts have expired. So probably next week after, you'll start seeing announcements for players like Georgia Stanway, who I'm sure, even if you have no interest in women's football, I'm sure you know that name, England international. Ona Barche, one of the best fullbacks in the world. as well. We broke the story about Geraldine Reuteler, Swiss midfielder, who's going to come in as well. There are a couple of others linked. But the summer in the women's football calendar before July, it's all about the free transfers. That's all you hear about. That's what's getting done at the moment. And then when we tick into July and all those are done, then you start getting the paid transfers. And that's the section of the summer Arsenal are coming into. I am expecting them to be busy and for a few more players to be coming in. I would expect at least one quite big money signing, albeit, the players that are coming in on free transfers, they're 27-year-old internationals who've won everything. They're going to be on big money, but I'd expect Arsenal to go big somewhere, maybe in the attack, and secure like a relatively expensive signing, should we say. And I think stuff like that will start coming out in the next few weeks, hopefully via us.
Yes.
But we'll see. There's more competition out there for breaking these stories nowadays.
Well, that's it. It's going to be busy. People should keep an eye, obviously, on Arseblog News and the dedicated Arsenal Women's section, which you take care of and break many stories on. Right, we better leave it there. Stay cool as much as you can in the heat of London. It's not quite as warm here in Dublin, and I'm already kind of feeling a little bit sticky, and it's going to get warmer here today. So stay cool, and we'll talk to you soon, Tim. Thanks a million.
My pleasure as always.
Thank you very much indeed to Tim. You can find him on Blue Sky. He is at tim-stillman.bsky.social, at tim-stillman.bsky.social. And remember, for all the breaking news with Arsenal women and transfers and stories, you can check out all the stuff Tim and the crew put together over at arseblog.news. Right, we had a competition last week, a chance to win a copy of After Review from Poorly Drawn Arsenal. The question was very, very simple. I asked you who was on the front cover. The answer was Mikel Arteta. He was the man on the cover, or is the man on the cover of the book. The random number generator has done its thing, and the winners are Kate Lennon and David Dargle. Well done to you. I'll be in touch. Bear in mind that the book is not yet out. It's not going to be released for another little while. Jacob is doing all the pre-orders and stuff, so it's going to be a little later, but we will organise those prizes to be sent out to you as soon as the book is ready. And if you want to order, I think June 30th is the end of pre-orders. So once again, you will find a link to the book in the show notes, and you can make a pre-order there and support the great work that Jacob does. Right, I'm going to leave it there for now. We've managed to squeeze quite a bit out of nothing much, so I hope you enjoyed the show as always. If you like it, please do give us a review on the podcasting platform of your choice. It always helps. As ever, we appreciate you being here, for listening, downloading, subscribing, and everything else. So for now, take it easy, folks. You can join myself and James on Monday for an Arsecast Extra. Until then, though, take it easy. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Welcome back to Sky Sports News. And we have some breaking news direct from the World Cup. FIFA President Gianni Infantino has announced that he has hired legendary film director Christopher Nolan in an effort to get fans back on side with the hydration breaks. Nolan, according to Infantino, will make a hydration break within a hydration break, but also make time go backwards so you can have another hydration break within the hydration break that was already within the other hydration break. Apologies, sounds like we had a bit of feedback on the microphone there. What the fuck is Leonardo DiCaprio doing here? I think we need to take a commercial break. When we return, Sam Allardyce is here to explain to us why George Clooney was a better Batman than Christian Bale.